everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast, and we're here today bringing a little bit of industry news to you. And, you know, Jason, you and I made the decision. We said, you know, yes, of course, we can come up with a news story, but what if we put it to our nation members and listeners and see if, you know, they have some stories that they want to suggest as well. And so I put this poll in front of the Facebook group, and this is what we got back. So just really quickly, I mean, spoiler alert, right? People are going to look at the masthead and they'll see today we're going to be talking about tariffs, which, Jason, what's your favorite subject to discuss?
Not tariffs, tell you that much.
Is it not tariffs?
It's not tariffs. Well, I'm curious what else was in the poll then.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if we were having fun today during our conversation or not. So we're not going to have fun.
I'd be surprised.
So my suggestions were we can discuss the fact that MGP, their sales had dropped by 16% in 2024. 1.6, yeah. Right? A massive quarterly drop. And we know that they slowed production down as well, right? So, you know, that's something we wanted to discuss. Another thing we wanted to discuss was the U.S. tariffs on Canadian whiskey and Mexican products, you know, highlighting, you know, as far as drinks go, agave spirits. And both of those received an equal number of votes, 33% of the votes each. I also added in the fact that Irish whiskey exports surpassed 1 billion euros, right? So here we are, we're hearing MGP is down. We know the bourbon industry is taking a little bit of a hit, but Irish whiskey is up, right? That seemed interesting by comparison. Oh. That received exactly 0% of the votes in our poll.
Interesting.
But we did have two late additions to the poll, and this was by not by us. This was by our good friend Ollie Chilton. And I say this, right, because I want to invite other people to add in their suggestions when we do these polls. But here's Ollie's suggestions for topics. Suggestion number 1, the potential return of the Jubilee with 18% of the votes.
Louise, what a troublemaker.
And for 8% of the votes, that doesn't add up. 18 plus 8 plus 33 plus, oh, I guess it does add up. Okay. And then 8% of the votes is the excitement around, what do you think it is, Jason?
Excitement.
Yeah, there's an excitement.
The launch of the Independent Bottlers short series?
Real close. Actually, not close at all. The excitement around the upcoming episode regarding worm tubs.
Oh, he missed it. That's been out for years.
I know, right?
That's a classic episode around One Nation Under Whiskey. Sorry, Ollie, you got to go into the archives. Yeah. It's in there, mate. Enjoy it when you find it.
One of these days, we may have something like that. I think eventually, Jason, the joke has to end.
I don't know what you're talking about, Joshua. I have no idea what you're talking about. Anyway. Maybe the team behind Water of Life film will do a movie on worm tubs. And we'll just have an episode that points at them.
Yeah, it's just us reciting a URL. Go to this URL if you want to see the worm tub movie.
Yeah, I'm surprised with the feedback on the poll there. I would rather have a root canal than discuss more tariffs. I think this is just mind-boggling. I have nothing fresh to say about this. We are just going to retread ground that we have been covering for 6 years, 7 years.
Well, we got a break from it though, right? We got that break in
like 5 minutes.
What was it? Was it 2021? Maybe 2020? Yeah, I think it was 2021, right?
Right. I would have agreed with you. It could be 21. It might be 22. Like, yeah.
I think it was 21, right? And so at that time, right, there was a 25% tariff on Scotch whiskey, single malt Scotch whiskey, coming into the U.S., and there was also a reciprocal 25% tariff on American spirits going into the UK. And then those tariffs, they weren't thrown away. It was just simply put on a 5-year pause by the Biden administration. It would have been nice for them to just dump it, but for whatever reason, it was a pause. They took a pause for the cause. And with the idea that the issue could be renegotiated, and if there wasn't a renegotiation by the end of 2026, or I guess by the start of 2027, the tariffs would go back into place. So the good news is we're not currently talking about tariffs on Scotch whiskey into the U.S. or reciprocal tariffs of bourbon and rye whiskey and American spirits into the UK. But now we have this what Prime Minister Trudeau is calling the start of a trade war between the U.S. and Canada, 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods. There is an exception to that, and I want to talk about that in a minute. And then also a 25% tariff on Mexican goods that, as of the morning of Thursday, March 6th, was put on a pause yet again for a month. So it seems that Mexico is off the hook, at least for a month, but Canada is on the hook for 25% tariffs, with the exception of car parts. So, right?
Just staring at each other.
Yeah. So it's the
makes sense.
It seems United Auto Workers union complained, and I get it, right? You've got car parts that go to and fro, back and forth, and it's going to increase the cost of cars. According to the interview that I'd heard, it would increase the cost of cars by thousands of dollars. And their point was, like, look, we get what you're trying to do with the tariffs. And if you see it as a positive for your economic goal, that's what you see as a positive for your economic goal. However, as American car producers, we're up against the Japanese who don't have tariffs, against the Germans who don't have tariffs. Again, and the list went on. And so that 25% tariffs on car parts has gone away. But it hasn't gone away on Canadian whiskey into the U.S. And then I heard this morning from our good friend Dave Schmier, who runs Proof and Wood, Canada was a growing market for him. And Ontario basically said they're refusing to allow any American spirits to be imported into Canada. Shops can sell any existing stock that's on the shelf, but they cannot bring any new stock in.
So, pausing for 1 second, what happened at the end of February when Canada had a 1-day pause on all bourbon coming in from America in response to tariffs on Canadian spirits, products,
right? I mean, it was steel, it was wood, it was lumber, right? I mean, it was anything from Canada, which is lumber being a big one, which is why, the Trump administration had said, well, if there's a 25% tariff on Canadian lumber, we can open up, cutting trees in about 280 million acres of currently protected land to keep the business in America, right? That's the approach. I'm not trying to make this political at all. I'm just, trying to give the facts here. So to answer your question here, it was on all Canadian goods. The biggest one of the biggest imports from the U.S. into Canada is bourbon whiskey. And so that wasn't the end of February. It was more towards the middle of February where the tariffs were proposed.
Every day feels like it's a year long. So here we are.
Where the tariffs were proposed, and Canada had said, okay, if you're doing this, right. Tariffs are hardball, right? They're being used as hardball. So the Canadian had said,
they're being used as a cudgel.
Right, exactly. So the Canadians said, okay, you do that to us, we're going to cut off imports of bourbon. And after that had happened, the Trump administration said, okay, well, we're going to put a pause on this for a month. And so I don't think that full month had passed us by. Maybe it did, because you're right? Every day feels like a month in and of itself currently. But here we are, and nothing has changed. No further agreements happened, and the tariffs went into effect, and there are no more bourbon sales into Canada right now. And Ontario's a massive market.
That's wild. That's American jobs, right?
Yeah.
Look at the expansion. Look at the visit we just had with Jane and Denny at Potter Jane Distillery. New build, $50 million project. And what does their future look like? How do you operate a bourbon business without Canada? The last time you and I were talking about all this garbage was back with Europe, right? We spoke to producers who were trying to build Europe. I think about Scott and Becky Harris at Catoctin Creek. Europe was important for them. They were working on building Europe. Retaliatory tariffs in Europe made it more difficult for them to operate their business, to grow their business, to hire more Americans to work in their business. It's the thing I keep saying. I think we maybe covered it back when we did the year in preview with Susanna Skyver Barton, very good friend of the Padcast.
Oh, yeah.
And the point that I wanted to make there that is worth repeating in this episode. I can't believe I'm repeating it in this episode, but here we are.
You look so pained right now.
These are people, right? These are real lives. This is an industry that supports oftentimes rural communities. You don't tend to find distilleries in the hearts of cities here in America. Clearly, with the craft boom, we see some smaller distilleries in cities. But you're the lifeblood, right? In talking to Jane and to Denny over the years, they've talked about hiring locally. They've talked about having a bottling plant on site. They've talked about their operation being multi-generational, right? These are all hugely important terms. What an ethos to carry forward. But it only works if there are places to sell your product. And to be rapidly losing markets for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Right, that's the shocking part, and to just completely dismiss Canada, as an international trading partner, it boggles the mind. Absolutely boggles.
Well,
the mind.
Speaking of boggling minds, I really didn't want to get political, but this feels a bit glaring, right? So the reason that the Trump administration is saying we're putting these tariffs into place is they say the current trade deal is simply a bad deal for America.
Yeah. Is that NAFTA? The NAFTA deal?
No, so it's not the NAFTA deal. NAFTA, and this is my point here, right? So the NAFTA deal has has a new name, which I think is USA something or other, right? And it was a rewritten deal between the US, Canada, and Mexico. And while I don't know how it changed from what it was as NAFTA, the point that I want to make here is that it was written by the previous Trump administration in 2018 as a really good deal and, something that improved upon NAFTA. So here we are now 7 years later in 2025, and the deal that was written in 2018 went from being a really good deal for America to being an absolutely terrible deal for America. And I don't understand what happened in between. Like, it's a plan that worked. Why is it not working? So I don't understand what the motive for it was. Again, to your point earlier, we're trading partners, we're neighbors, we're allies, and these are out of the blue tariffs that don't seem to have a bearing on much of anything. Maybe steel. I mean, America was at one time a pretty big producer of steel. There's plenty of foreign competition from China and in Mexico and in Canada, and maybe that plays a part in it. But back to your comment, man. Absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, the other aspect for me is, and again, to retread former ground, when we were discussing these the first go around, we talked about how would the consumer be protected from the increases, right? In your Impex at that point, you saw people like Kilhoman, splitting the cost of tariffs with their importer as one example. I know other people did it as well. And we worked diligently to not pass it on to the consumer as well.
Right.
And I get the sense this time around that producers are less willing to protect the consumer, right? It's now more of a case of, if this is the way the political wind is going to blow in America, then the people who vote need to see consequences for those votes. And I could see, and again, we're not yet at the point where there is US tariffs on Scotch coming in. We kind of open the episode by discussing whether that is on the agenda, on the table, what have you, in the future. But I would want the messaging, and we don't have any links to SWA, Scotch Whisky Association. We do have links to Discus, and I know people have been reaching out to Discus to have conversations about how is their lobbying going. But I think if we were to ultimately see tariffs make it onto Scotch, then I think the consumer is going to see increased bottle prices on shelves. Anything not already in country is going to be subject to those tariffs. I think the consumer needs to see it. The consumer needs to feel it. The consumer needs to know that there are consequences to bringing in politicians who are gung-ho on tariffs.
Yeah. I think if this were popping up again during the latter half of COVID, where the whiskey sales were booming, then you might be correct in that, everybody's buying whiskey and they're spending ridiculous money on whiskey. And what's 25% going to do to them, because people are just buying whiskey? We're at a time now when, back to this example of MGP sales dropping by 16% in the fourth quarter of 2024. We're in a situation where people are buying less. So I think your gut is right in that foreign producers are like, fucking hell, this again? And they wouldn't want to squeeze their margins to try to help out. However, the markets all over the world have become a bit more difficult when it comes to whiskey sales, and they may make concessions and just say, this really sucks. We'd hate to do it again, but A, we need the sales, and B, we don't want to potentially hurt our brand by not doing that again.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a real sense of that. Here we go again. Yeah. Right. And I think that's where there's maybe less patience for sucking it up, right? Taking one for the team. I think it is more important to send a message, right, to the consumer, to make it clear to the consumer that this is This is what we're all living through. This is what we're all experiencing. Here's what you need to say. We did, again, right? With Susanna, we had the conversation about, in the year in preview, the Bourbon Lake, right? In the Scotch Loch, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking in the time we've been discussing this today, on one hand, we're talking about the softening, right? The softening of markets. On the other hand, we're talking about production is continuing. We are starting to hear, Glenglasser, right, going to half a year production. Ben Riach doing the other half of the year, right, sharing a team between those two distilleries. Perhaps producers do need to be producing less, right? We're hearing 7-day-a-week shifts now coming down to 5 days a week, right, in some Scottish producers. And so if you do need to produce less, if you do start to slow that down, perhaps you're not trying to get as much into America, right? Maybe if you're saying we're producing less and it's painful to get into America, maybe we don't send as much to America, right? There's another consequence for the consumer, right? We're talking about availability. We're talking about good bottlings coming to America. And we've only seen that in the ascendancy for 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
Options in America have only gotten better in 2 decades. And I live in Virginia. Offerings aren't great. We share a border with Pennsylvania, or we're close to Pennsylvania. Control state, options haven't been great in there. However, there's additional commerce in America, so you can take advantage of some better bottlings coming in. I would be a little bit concerned about the variety of bottlings coming in as a consumer in this country. Is Canada get to try to send as much in here with 25% tariffs going on their lot coming in here? How does Canadian Club feel about this?
Oh, I bet you Canadian Club does not like it at all. I mean, but quickly back to your point, right? Where your point of seeing distilleries slow down, going from 7-day week to a 5-day week, or sharing a production team across 2 distilleries. It's back to what you said earlier, which that's jobs. I mean, if you have 2 distilleries that are going to share a production team, that means someone has lost their job or some people have lost their jobs. So you've got that aspect of it on the production side of it. Then on the import side of it here in the U.S., if the feel is like you say, where they say, you know what, we're simply not going to cut our margins, and the price will be what the price will be because of tariffs, it puts the importer in the position of either A, trimming their margins so that they can keep prices down to just continue selling, but then they're making less money to pay their employees.
I think I know where this is going.
Or B, they just apply the added 25% to the cost, and then retailers aren't going to bring in the extra bottlings that people are already not buying because it's coming at an increased cost. And now these importers will be sitting on a bunch of stock that they've laid out money for that they simply can't sell. So who's being hurt is American businesses and the American consumer. I mean, yes, foreign producers are being affected as well. There's no doubt about it. But when you're playing with the livelihoods of American business as a bargaining chip, it just doesn't seem to be the right thing to be doing. And the point coming from President Trump was, it's going to hurt to start, but then it's going to get better. You see, it's going to get better, and things will be good again. Progress doesn't always have to be painful. Especially when it's your own people. And I think about, a number of our friends, especially in Kentucky. It's a red state. A lot of people who voted for President Trump and Vice President Vance. And I hear it from them. I'm not going to mention any names, but they say, this isn't what we voted for. We wanted lower prices. This isn't, we wanted lower prices. We wanted our borders protected. We wanted, X, Y, and Z. But now we're getting this stuff and it's affecting my livelihood. Like, this is not good.
I would imagine the price of bourbon is going to come down, perhaps dramatically so, because there's going to be such a glut of it.
I mean, that's
no more allocations. It's a victory.
Pappy for everybody.
You get a pappy, and you get a pappy, and you get a. They're going to go back to Stitzel Weller juice. That's how good it's going to be. Oh man, it's tough. It's really tough sledding, right? And obviously, along with a glut comes shorter shifts and fewer days of the week in production, and that's what I was asking Susanna and asking you, right? And asking people when I'm at tastings and meeting bourbon people as well, right? I didn't live here in the 1980s. I don't know what the bad days of bourbon looked like. I've only lived here during the ascendancy of bourbon. I've only seen bourbon getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Mm-hmm. And now it's in the last year, 18 months, 2 years, where I'm seeing my first slowdown. And now the talk of, is it going to be the 80s for bourbon again? And I think, how do you bolster that industry? You open up global markets. You make sure you can send it around the world. And you make it easy for producers to send it around the world. You don't create all these hurdles and only allow them to sell it within the United States. That, to me, is where the price starts to bottom out on bourbon, when you can only really sell it within one market.
Well, it's really, it's tough to say, right? Like when we look at the overall drop in sales, you say, well, maybe we are going to have a bourbon lake. Maybe we will have a Scotch whiskey lock again. But then you go to whiskey fairs, whiskey events, or we do a seminar, and they're always filled. They're always full. People are still incredibly interested in the spirit.
Yeah.
My hope is that, what I've been saying for the past year and a half or so is that, sales are slowing down because over COVID, people had nothing to do other than stay home and max out their credit card and fill their shelves. And so they need to drink through that, and pay off their cards or do, whatever it is. The interest isn't gone. They just, like, you're looking at my shelves. I know what your shelves look like. They're kind of full. And so my hope is that aspect of it might change as people start drinking through their stuff and having a whiskey. And if that is the case, having a whiskey lake may not be the biggest help for the whiskey industry.
Yeah. Complex economic structures that two whiskey jamokes are making sense of. Right, along with whiskey jamoke consumers who are like, just give me a bottle. Just give me a top quality bottle at a terrific price, and we'll go from there. Right? We are such simple people at heart who believe in the liquid, believe in the people making the liquid, love talking to fellow drinkers of the liquid. And here we are grappling with difficulties like tariffs. Did I see correctly in the last, throwing time at you again, 2 days, 7 days, India has reduced their tariffs on bourbon?
I did not see that India had reduced their tariffs. I know the Scotch Whisky Association had been pressing India hard to reduce their current 150% tariff.
And nothing has changed there. Yeah, nothing has changed there.
But it's changed for bourbon.
Yeah. Bourbon tariffs have been reduced in India. And I don't know if that's the beginning of a negotiating tactic, right? For India, like, what are car parts in India? You know, like there has to be something else behind the scenes on that.
Yeah, so that was, I'm looking at it right now. That was February 24th.
There you go.
The
Every day feels like a year.
Government of India published a customs notification lowering the customs duty on imported bourbon whiskey from 150% to 100% and effective immediately, while duty on all other alcoholic beverages, and that's imported, obviously, alcoholic beverages, remains unchanged at 150%.
There you go. I think that's the beginning of a negotiation from India's side.
I think it. Yeah.
Look what we did for American bourbon. You know, Baruch, longtime Nation guy, emailed the other week to say he was heading to Kentucky and he was asking for my recommendations for American bourbon producers to visit. And I was like, bless you for using American bourbon. So beautiful. Mwah.
I really prefer the Japanese bourbon. Japanese bourbon
made me
delicious.
so happy. That was a good move. So yeah, I think you're looking at a global negotiation there, which is, okay, what can America do for India if India is already reduced from 150 to 100%? 100% tariff on bourbon is insane.
Right.
But it's not 150%. So
yeah,
it's a global moves. Always worth watching, right? There's going to be a lot not going into Canada. Here we go. You just said this, in today's episode. We're sitting here Thursday, March 6th. We saw these tariffs paused previously. Mm-hmm. Does Canada, even threatening to stop importing American bourbon and American rye, does that have an effect? Does the cudgel of tariffs bring Trudeau to the table to have a further conversation? Like when we hit stop on this recording, is there a part of you thinks you're going to be reading about the month-long pause on these tariffs in any given minute?
Well, just before we recorded, I saw that Prime Minister Trudeau had said, and I'm paraphrasing here, even if the tariffs get removed for another month pause, we are not going to end our retaliatory.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Basically, they will not allow bourbon to be imported into Canada, even if that happens. So right. And this was the point that I was going to make before. It's clear the two leaders don't like each other. And that makes sense, right? Trudeau is very far left. Trump is very far right. So I'd be surprised if they had much common ground to discuss. But when we look at President Trump and Modi of India, they're both more far right and probably see eye to eye on some things and see opportunities where they can partner a little bit. So I think it might be interesting to just, do some digging, think about the countries that President Trump does have friendships with when it comes to their leaders. And you get an idea of where, we may or may not see tariffs happen. It's all about those relationships for him. It's all about those.
There's a clear liquid we need to start putting in cask from a foreign country. Is that what you're trying to tell me here?
I'm not saying anything, Jason.
I like potatoes.
Potatoes.
I just don't like the fermentables.
Right, and I think just my last point, and I know we got to get out of here, but my last point on this is I was thinking about President Trump's relationship with Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK, and my understanding is that it's neither good nor bad. There isn't necessarily a bad relationship there. So my hope is that Prime Minister Starmer is at the very least smart about his dealings with President Trump, who likes to be talked to and treated a certain way, because it seems clear Trump is ready to enact tariffs or whatever measures taken to ensure that he feels he's being treated fairly. So that is a relationship that I am going to be watching pretty closely, because I think it will affect our business and the businesses of so many of our friends here in the U.S.
Yeah, no, very much. Very much.
Yeah.
All right, we did it.
We did it.
We covered the ground on tariffs. You are welcome, listener. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
My goal is for us to never bring up tariffs again unless they're eliminated. Yet again, but
no chance. I can't believe in the poll, Irish whiskey got 0 votes, and talking about tariffs got 1/3 of the votes. Holy macaroni.
Yeah, someone just responded with like a handmade sign that said Irish need not apply. I don't know what that meant.
Oh, it is a handmaid's tale over here, so that's a good sign to have.
Listen, to the listeners, thank you for chiming in on our poll on the Singlecast Nation private Facebook members page. I'm going to put that same poll up into the One Nation Under Whiskey page next time as well. So just a reminder, we're going to be doing these industry news focused podcasts once per month. And so next few weeks, if you're a Singlecast Nation member, check out the Facebook page. If you're a Singlecast Nation member and you're not in our private Facebook page, please do a search for the Singlecast Nation Facebook group and ask to join it. We'll make sure that you are a member, and then we'll let you in. There's a lot of great conversation and community that happens in that group. If you want to email us your suggestions as well, you can email us info@singlecastnation.com. And we're always open to talking about any bit of news that you're keen for us to discuss. We may not want to discuss tariffs anytime soon, but
and sometimes we may very well spend the 35 minutes discussing liquid whiskey in our glasses, and
indeed.
Those are better than tariffs. But
man,
everything's better than tariffs. So.
Everything's better than tariffs.
Well, cheers.
All right, yeah. Do we say cheers to this painful episode?
I'd say cheers and get out of here.
Cheers and get out of here.
Cheers.